This is, are we doing a real episode?
Listen, I didn't come here for this, but I'm here for it. If we're doing it, I think we can just play.
We can just play with it and see what's going on.
And who knows what'll come from it?
Exactly.
You just never know. That's what I can't tell you how many. I have a lot of communions, a lot of conversations, and a lot of times at the end of them, it's like, man, I wish we would have just pushed record. And so that is, and I'm learning that I think I'm sitting with, does it change once record? Like getting comfortable with not letting the hitting record change it. You know what I mean? And not that I think it does, but it's any time like that. Like if you get a camera on you, all of a sudden, it changes the behavior a little bit. And, so I've just been playing with that of like, how can I just be in it in a way that it doesn't have to go anywhere, but that's also an issue of mine is like, I'll record a lot of stuff and then I won't ever do anything with it. So I'm trying to find the happy balance between all of that. What's appropriate.
Well, when I first started, it was like at first, I could tell there was like, I'm nervous to record, but then after a while, it's kind of like going to the gym. That's the reference I usually use is like, at first you're like, how am I going to produce an episode a week? I don't know how that's going to go. And then you just keep at it. And eventually it's like, oh, I'm not scared anymore. I'm not, it's just like, I'm looking forward to it. You know?
It's just the thing you do every week. It's just that. And you had told me that you've like simplified the process in a way. And I think that's something for me too. I tend to be very overcomplicated because that's just how I am with all my Gemini-ness and all the other parts of me. But I'm really working on that too, of just really bringing it into simplicity and allowing for that to be enough. And so I'm excited to see like that part of the process too. And you said that to me of like, just let me show you how simple it can be. I'm like, yes, please.
Well, I said that and then I brought you into a room I've never used before and made it very complicated.
This isn't, but this is just the newness of finding a new play platform for you. And I think that even in all this complication, it's still like, what is the after process for me? Because even the technology can always be complicated in my world, but it's the after process that I get hung up in because I'm like, once I've done it, it's done. And I need to hand it to somebody. I always have that feeling of like, I just want to hand it off to somebody else and then do it. But then I'm like, oh, no, this is mine.
I forgot. I actually don't want to hand it off.
Yeah. So that's I'm learning that in my life too. So how do you do all of it yourself?
Yeah. Everything. I find the guests. I am the host. I do the editing. I send it out in the world. I am the talent. I come up with a lot of the ideas. Some of my like co-hosts, we work together on it, but for the most part, I drive for the whole thing. Yeah, the whole situation.
And you have sometimes co-hosts, and then sometimes it's just you, or do you just do play?
Mostly co-hosts, but I started out season 1. I had a regular co-host, and then she had things come up in her life that she couldn't be on the show anymore, and so then season 2, I rotated. I was out finding a guest, a new guest every single week. And I was like, this is a lot. And like, if maybe I could sustain this if this was my full-time job. Yeah. But this is not my full-time job. So I can't find a new guest every week. So that was season 2. And then season 3, I found regular people that I have 3 or 4 rotating guests that we all just like, I interview them once a month basically.
Nice.
And so and then sometimes I sprinkle in other new people from time to time, but the constant is me.
Yeah. And I feel that too within like Spill the Sovereignty, because I see that as a round table kind of thing where maybe it's a one-on-one, but then maybe there's also multiple people there, but I will be there in every episode. And then I also, Mystic Musings kind of wants to come through as just when I'm in my mystic energy. And those are kind of, that's what I'm saying. Those are more like a lot of times either I call it mystic morning musings, like it's in the morning when I'm in my, time by myself, or it's at night. Like it's just, or in my car. They always want to come through in my car. And I have the loudest car, so she is not good to record. And I've recorded some of the best stuff ever in my car. And I'm like, well, nobody can hear anything I'm saying. So there is that, like, I think that's been a part of it too, is trying to find how to step into it in a way that feels more aligned, because that's what I think with like the having other people, there's that accountability there too. And it helps to move that energy. And then the other one that we're wanting to do for the soulpreneurs and for Soul Software is to have like where we interview soulpreneurs that are in our network and stuff, and on a regular basis. And so I'm just like, well, I've got to get my feet wet somewhere and get it like figured out. And then I can produce all of them. But right now I just need to focus probably on one.
Well, the best piece of advice that was given to me is just push record, and then your first group of episodes are just going to be bad. And as soon as you can accept that they're going to be bad and move on, then you can do it.
What do you normally like? Do you have an idea? Do you plan yours out? Like you have ideas that come through, or you're just like off the cuff?
It's a mixture. So I, most of the time, cause I'm good at making friends and telling stories. So, it's easy for me to just say, hey, oh my gosh, you won't believe this week I had the craziest thing, and let me tell you about it. And then we talk about that, and it leads to, I talked about one thing, and then it leads to, oh my gosh, I had a story about this. It's a natural conversation. So like, I don't really come to conversations with topics planned out, but I will be like, oh, I can't wait to tell so-and-so about this on the podcast next week. And I just started a new segment that I've only released one episode of, and that is The News Goes Girl Talk. So that one has quite a bit more research and picking of titles and of topics and stuff like that. But that is my most structured one. And that only happens like once a month. So
so you have like series that you do.
I just started that.
Okay. Yeah. That's, I've sat with that, and I feel like you've got to kind of like, what comes through naturally is like, don't start with series, to start just like evolving first, and then would you agree to that?
Well, I mean, it just depends on what you want to do. Like a true crime podcast, they're going to need to do all the research and like have the series and do all that. But if you're trying to have like a conversational interview style podcast, it's easier to start off, like get your skills and get to a point where you don't feel scared walking into the room anymore. And then once you're in that place, then you have room in your cup for other things that aren't feeling scared to push record. Yeah. And so that was my evolution of myself. It might be different for other people, but for me, it was, I started by just pushing record and just doing it. And then once I felt comfortable, then I was like, oh, I can go off in this direction. I can go off in that direction. And I want to creatively do this or things like that. But for most part with the conversation parts, I just like walk in and I'm like, this thing happened to me at the grocery store. I'm watching this on Netflix. Did you watch that? And that kind of stuff is typically where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like there's something there where it's like, there's the planner in me in one way wants to have some kind of structure, but then that's not like, I just flow always. So I think that's where I kind of get into resistance sometimes, because one part of me is totally available just to be off the cuff. But then the other part is like, oh no, but we need to have like a plan, or we're going to look like we don't know what we're doing, So I'm definitely having to hold both of those parts. And I think what stopped me is like the first episode. And I know, like, I hear what you're saying, because it's like always like, oh my God, it's got to be perfect. Like, it's got to be, I've got to plan that. I've got to have it figured out, And I'm like, that's not,
it's impossible. There's too many factors that you can't account for, that like something is going to happen, and you're just going to have to accept that the other track got lost and you have to re-record or whatever. Like there's a lot of things you can't plan for, but maybe like answer that planning part of you and say, all right, the first 3 episodes, I'm going to line up this person, and this person. And then that can be satisfy your planning self. And then I'm not going to plan what we talk about, and I'm going to go off the cuff for what we talk about, but I will say we're going to record on this day with this person at this time. And then that might satisfy your planning side and your spontaneous side.
Yeah. That feels good. Yeah. I think that's been the thing is like I've recorded so much off the cuff, but then I have not produced any of it because I feel like I don't have the polished first episode that tells about what this is and what it's doing, like that kind of introduction.
You can always like replace your first episode if you want. I choose not to do that because I'm like, look how far I've come. But nobody I won't say nobody. A lot of people just start where you are currently and don't go all the way back. They start where you are currently and then make their way back to the first. But some people, they're like, no, I'm a truist. I'm going to start from the beginning and go to the end. But
that's right. I hadn't even thought of it that way. Thank you for that. That's like a huge release of like, yeah, the only people that are going to hear that are going to be clued in on the first episode generally are going to be your first listeners. And then after you've got some, like those people are going to be listening because I go in wherever, somebody sends it to me or whatever happens.
Yeah, you just scroll down the first 10 or whatever.
And then I start looking, I'm like, well, what else piques my interest? But I don't, now that you've said that, I'm like, well, have I ever went back? I mean, probably yes, if there was just a few that I've went back to the beginning.
And the first people that listen to your podcast is going to be your besties, your partners, all these things. And those people just want to hear you. They don't, they're not worried if it's perfect or not. And they hear you every day anyway when you're on the phone with them. So it's no big deal. Yeah.
And does that when you started doing that, what was your process of sharing that? Like, how do you move that energy in the podcast world?
Well, my journey is different than it was when I started, because when I started, I had a regular co-host. And so for season 1, I worked with her and we, came up with the way that we send it out into the world. And that it's kind of like, was kind of like training wheels for me. So I got to hold somebody's hand the whole time for my whole first season. And then whenever it was time for me to go off on my own, I was able to go off on my own and wasn't worried about anything.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. That's comforting too, of just like, I think that's been a part of the reason that wanting to do, maybe it feels less pressure to do the one that is multiple people. Because then there are multiple energies to support and to move that energy with versus just doing it by yourself. I can imagine that the pressure of that feels like.
Although I have friends that they have just by themselves podcasts. They just get on and talk for 20 minutes about the thing that they're excited about. And they tell me the opposite. They say, my co-host once, I'm so used to just talking and doing whatever I want to do that now that somebody else is here, it feels weird and I don't know how to react to that. So it really comes down to a lot of like, what's your preference and what do you want?
And I feel that I think that's why I want to have multiple types too, is because it does allow for that play and to see what feels best.
And something else that is a perk about recording with multiple different people is those people then go and say, did you know I'm on a podcast? And then they don't have to do that, but if they are excited about it, they'll be like, oh, this is that other podcast I'm on. I'm excited to talk about this. And then that also, because word of mouth is the number one way that people find out about podcasts.
Yeah. That was something great that I learned at the festival, was like hearing that talked about how podcasting is in kind of a different space. It doesn't have an algorithm, like it doesn't have the same thing as what social media and I love that because I've moved further and further away from all that. It's one of the reasons that I've built the structures that I have, is because I'm like, I don't want something else having control over how my energy moves.
Yeah.
And so that feels good. And then also it's like okay, well, it better be good so people share it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crap, there was something that came through just a second ago. I wanted to ask. It's gone now. Oh, well. It'll come back if it's meant to.
Yeah.
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 Well, this feels good. See?
Yeah.
And this is doable.
This is doable. This is
so
totally doable. Yeah, right? It's not as scary as it seems.
Yeah. Dang, I feel like that was really something I wanted to ask.
Well, we were talking about how word of mouth. Is that going to ring a bell for you?
I don't know. Well,
that's okay.
It's fine. Whatever.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. It's normal in my daily day.
Do you want to talk about like who you are and what you like and your podcast and stuff? Because I might post this as a bonus episode.
Oh, yeah. Now you're going to get me nervous. No.
Well, the reason why I might post it as a bonus episode is because that way I can show you like full send, be like, this is how you take the audio file and distribute it. And this is what you put in the show notes. And this is how it works. But if you don't want to do that,
no, I can do it.
We cannot do that.
I can do it. It's good for me. It's this, I think one of the hardest things that anybody can ask me, honestly, is like, what do I do? Or who, like what that is, because it is such a full spectrum answer. And it is a very interesting part of where I am in life, is like being able to embody and hold all of it and not box myself in, because I can't stand to be boxed in. And then I catch myself like, oh, well, for this person, I need to be like this is who I introduce. And so, yeah, I think I'll preface with that, is that I'm very full spectrum. I am an ordained space holder. I am a ceremonialist. Nope, that's not right. Why is that word not working for me? Ceremonialist?
Ceremonialist?
Why is my mouth? Yeah, that. So I hold a lot of space in a very like spiritual way, not religious at all, because I am big on deconstructing religion from my experience. But I hold a lot of space in that way. And then I skew all the way over to being someone who is working in the tech field and like creating softwares and building structures to support people to what we call soulpreneurs, entrepreneurs that are really leading with their heart and their soul and really bringing their passions forward in that way to really be of service to the greater good, whatever that means for them. That can mean infinite things. And so holding those very different spaces, and then I have a lot that happens in the middle as well. So for my podcast, Spill the Sovereignty is probably the name, and just all of it makes me happy to think about. And I've been envisioning that for a very long time. For multiple years, I've told people it was coming out because I'm like, oh, we're about to start the thing. And then the thing don't happen because I have all these other projects. I tend to be spinning many plates at a time. And that for me is really bringing people together in a way to speak to sovereignty is such a big thing for me. Like, what is it to be truly in your sovereignty? And I think a lot of people don't even really truly know what that word means. And that has been such a huge process for me to come fully into myself and take full radical responsibility for this experience that I'm having. And I just really think that there is room for us to see things from different angles and different perspectives when we talk about those things, of what those things mean to us. And so that one is feels like a collective. It's a round table type of podcast where we talk about a lot of different things, and probably a lot of taboo things and a lot of like edgy things. And then also just like deep diving into our internal, self, and doing that in community though, because I think that a lot of us can get lost if you're on that path of, finding yourself or whatever you want to, call that. We can get lost in ourselves. And so reflecting with others and knowing that others are experiencing that and from different perspectives feels really important to me. So that's one of the podcasts, and that's probably the one that I'm most like, that needs to be out in the world. Like that needs to be out in the world right now.
There's a podcast in you.
Yes, that one is ready. And then I have also I consider myself a mystic. And that to me is just like really understanding that there's just so much unknown here. And there's such a beautiful mystery that we're all playing in together. And I have a lot of downloads and uploads, whatever you want to call it, that come through that I just enjoy sharing those things when they come through. And so that's another one that is sitting in the hopper. And then the last one is our Soulpreneurs experience, which is really about just having that conversation about what people are experiencing in that way as they come into being in their own authority and their own autonomy, and really creating sustainable ecosystems for themselves to live in, and to really be able to live this life and not just get caught up in the hamster wheel.
Absolutely.
But be on the leading edge of creating and cultivating what really they're passionate about.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So those are all, they're all living in me. They have been living there rent free for a while, and it's time for them to start paying some rent.
Well, nobody, it's real hard to make money off of a podcast. So that's like, I feel like a lot of people have like come in the last year or something being like, I'm going to start this and I'm going to make a bunch of money. And I'm like, you go for it. I applaud you if you can. To me, it's like, it's a useful hobby that I have learned and been able to like get myself out of a lot of different things. And I've grown so much as a person. So the things I get from my podcast are not monetary, but I also intentionally do that because I don't want to, I hate whenever I'm listening to a podcast in the middle, like all of a sudden an ad comes up. So I'm not monetizing in that way. I'm open to monetizing other ways, but that one I'm like, eh. And I think that's the most common way that people are going to make a ton of money is on ad revenue. And I'm like, not for me, but maybe for somebody else.
Well, I think when I say that it's time for them to start paying, it's more of like, it is for me a space to share all the things that I do, because I'm not, necessarily big on social media anymore. And I used to be, but it's just like, it's become such a, I'm just not there. Yeah, I'm not there in those ways. I'm really interested in the platform that we have created is about like creating these inclusive, exclusive communities where we're, it's like, you don't just open your door and let anybody walk into your house, but you do invite friends over, and you invite, people that you know and trust and love, and people you want to get to know. And that's the kind of spaces that I'm really into. And then sometimes, there's a part of me that's like, I want to go out here and, make something public. But I think for me, having somewhere to share about all of the things that I'm doing, that the people that I know are doing, and that kind of thing, monetizing in that way of it's an energetic exchange that's happening. And whether that's, like affiliates and different things, but it's a much more, it's like, I'm not going to be one to put ads on my stuff if they're not something that I directly have a connection with, because I am in a very different, I don't live life in the consumerist, capitalist kind of way. I just don't, and I will not participate in it. So it is a different thing, than that. And
money
also,
is fake.
Yeah, yes, completely, yes. And so it's that of more of just like a platform for me to be able to have those energetic exchanges like you're talking about. And that is where that feels like abundance to me.
Yeah. That's what I like about it too. And to me, it's less about making money and more about helping people feel less lonely, because my market is like a very niche, like very small, like I don't want to be an influencer. I mean, if the influencer money came, whatever, I'm not going to say no. But like, I want to keep it so that like people are listening to my show and texting me and being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that thing happened. Like, or did you watch Survivor yet? Like, I need to talk to you about it, because sometimes I like digest that kind of stuff on the show too. And so it's like, that's the point that I want, because since it is a one-way relationship with your listeners, because your brain, when you listen to podcasts, it's doing all the same things, making all the connections. So you're making those connections with me, and I want you to text me and like feel like open to like making it a two-way connection. Just because I put it out there, I want you to feel like you have a friend, but also like I am your friend.
Well, that's big intimacy. Intimacy is such a huge thing in my world, and I think people hear that word and they think of one type of intimacy. But intimacy, like what we're doing, is very intimate right now. We are having an intimate conversation. We are sitting here eye to eye. We're in, a small space together. Like that to me is how we cultivate the connection that we've lost
Mm-hmm.
with each other. It's how we come back to living in a more communal way together. And feeling that and not feeling like you're saying, not feeling alone and not feeling like we're the only ones going through the crap that we're going through, because we're not.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think to be able to, there's something about podcasting or about storytelling, about any of that, where I feel like people are more available to hear perspectives or hear things that they haven't been able to hear in another way before that may give them new insight. And I love that. I mean, that feels good. There was a time where being a teacher and being all these things, like a leader in these things, they were what I was told that I needed to like be. But then I got there and it was very lonely because everybody else was like, I was seen in a certain way that I couldn't have deep connections as much as I wanted to because I wasn't allowed to not be on or be in that way. And I'm like, I don't want that. That's not. And so I feel like this kind of platform as well allows for that like realness and the rawness.
And because it's long form.
Yeah.
Like I feel like short form videos are really popular right now and they will get you so far, but like not with actual connection. You might learn fun facts or see funny things and have a laugh or two, but with short form. But with long form content, you can actually get in there and actually be genuine and like show who you really are. And like I really am this person that like shows up every week and says, do you need help moving? Like I want to be there. I want to be connected with you. And so I really am that person. So that's why podcasting for me is a really good medium because I can be here sitting in the room while you're folding laundry, like saying, I'm your friend. And
you can, and that's it. It's like you're in the most intimate places with people, you're following them, whether they're in the shower, they're whatever, but they're like, you're there with them and they're letting you into their world in that way. And I think this brings up for me, like when you talk about short form and such, it's like our attention spans have gotten so small. And as someone who is a storyteller and who has that capacity to share things, it's like, I don't want to try to minimize this down into a little blurb, it's like there is a process that happens through storytelling, through sharing, and it is a nervous system, an operating system regulation that happens. It is, it just hits a different thing for me anyway, and I want to. That's what I want to provide for people is a space that they can sink into. And I didn't bring this up earlier, but probably one of my greatest passions and the thing that I am most passionate about, especially as an ordained space holder, and I know that this is a part of my path, is to create sanctuary. And sanctuary can be created wherever you are. I have a really big visions of what sanctuary can be, but I also know it can just be literally somebody being able to sit in the sanctuary of your presence and to be in presence with someone and for them to feel safe and secure in that spot. And whether that's with headphones in their ear or sitting in a room together or whatever that looks like, that seems like the most precious thing to me because we need more of that. We've lost so much of that in how we experience this world. Yeah.
I've never heard of an ordained space holder before. Do you want to talk about what how that happens and what that means?
It is I don't know. We can get into all that here.
There's no rules.
No, it was, I've always been a caretaker and I've always been someone who was a safe space and who held that space very strongly. And I also was dysregulated in that because it was not really, it wasn't necessarily my job to be doing that. Like I was taking it on as a job for a very long time. And as I went through a major life breakdown in the best way, about a decade ago, maybe, I went from living this life that I was told I should live. And I did all the things, I checked all the boxes, and I was absolutely miserable and I was sick. And it was not what I had been told it would be. And I took a hard pivot and said, I've got to get back to myself because I had completely just like knew that there was things that were bigger that were calling me. And so I ended up moving. I'll preface by saying I bought my first house and I built my first house when I was 19. It was very important to me to have a home and establish a home. And then I had my children, did all the things. And then I released all of that, went through, complete shift in my family dynamic, divorced, did all those things. And I ended up in this little camper, tiny camper in an eco village in Garfield here in Arkansas. The story of that is too much to say here, but it was one of those moments in life where literally everything that I had built fell away. And I, for the first time ever, had time to actually sit and be with myself in full presence and in nature, and just like had to defrag a whole lot of stuff.
I like your tech talk.
Yes. There was a lot of defragging that happened.
Do people still know what defragging is?
I don't know. I use tech a lot in my spiritual speaking. Like whenever I'm sharing with people about like
download, upload,
yeah,
I
do. And I'm like, oh, but it's because I am like, my generation was the first one to have computer lab. Like I am the generation that all technology kind of shifted in that way. And so I guess it's just a part of, I'm like, well, people understand that. So they can, a lot of the words I use, people are like, well, I don't know what she's saying. Because they can get real woo woo. So I guess is like, that kind of bridges the gap.
You're my target market.
Yes. And so in that space, I just really came to a place of having to completely surrender every bit of the idea of what I thought I was and should be and all the things. And the thing that came through and was so clear to me is like the most natural thing I do is just love people. And I care for people and I hold people in whatever they are. And I don't, judge. I have a lot of compassion. And not to say I never judge because I'm human. But I mean, those judgments are very minimal compared to what I think I have experienced previously. And so there was a journey, and I went through a process of going into some plant medicine ceremonies, going into just deep ceremony. I say the plants, that wasn't like the thing. I was already in such deep ceremony with myself and nature. And then those things kind of just took me to another level of awareness. And coming out of that, it was like, I will never forget the day that I was in my camper and I was having a, breakdown of like, how can I have already surrendered so much and still feel like there's something that I'm still supposed to like release? And in this moment, I just kind of was like, whatever, like I can't be in charge anymore because clearly I don't know what I'm doing. So there's got to be something beyond me that helps me out here. And I just in that moment, it just dropped in like the clarity of my most natural life path. And that was to be a space holder. I didn't know what that meant. I was a life coach at the time. Like I'd done all the like certification, had all that kind of stuff, but it was like, that's not quite it. That's the worldly way of doing it. And this is a much more intimate thing that you're being called to. And so through that process, that was a couple years that I just was in that and sitting with that. And then I was in a communion with someone one day, and they were sharing some very potent things with me. And I realized in that moment that there was something else that was asking me to like anchor this to where I could truly be a protected space for people to speak to, just like a therapist or anybody else. Like there's HIPAA, there's these things. And that dropped in that there was another layer to this for me. And that's where ordainment came in, was that I was meant to become ordained so that I could truly hold that space in a multitude of ways as someone who considers themselves a full spectrum doula, whether it's birth, death, everything in between.
Have we had this conversation yet?
No.
Okay.
Have we? Maybe. Have we?
I don't know, but do you know that I spent a year being a midwife's apprentice?
No.
And one of my former midwife teacher before I moved away, she's on the show all the time.
Oh my gosh.
And we go on feminist rants all the time.
I love that. Yes, let's talk more about that. So that just became my process of like, how do I hold that space in a way that people can feel fully protected? And that means it's like crazy stuff, like what people don't, I think, know about ordainment is like, I couldn't be put on a stand and have to tell anything. about somebody. It's like there is a protection there because
that's cool.
Because it's like it's like, and it's weird because here it's like people, the only thing I think people, for me living in Southern Bible Belt, kind of thing, it's like they think of like a pastor, preacher, whatever that is. And they are ordained in that way. And so this is like, how do I become what I know I am already? Like, how do I hold that without religion? Because that's not my thing, but this is a higher ordainment. And so that was the process to get me there. And then that's led me down all kinds of interesting paths and places. And
that is so cool.
Yeah.
I never thought about it like that. I've never even heard of this before.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did that. And I don't, like, I'm just now really claiming that in a way of, I've always claimed myself. I understand, like, I'm a space holder, but really coming into my empowerment in that and saying, like, this is a real thing, and we need more of it in this world. We don't have enough people holding. Yeah. And I'm here to hold. And it's interesting. It's not really necessarily something that, is, especially here, it's just not like it's not understood, I think, by a lot of people. I don't know how else to say it.
I get it.
Yeah, I know you do. And I'm grateful for the people that get it. But it's an interesting path to walk.
The area that we live in is, it's like people are stuck in a different dimension.
Totally 1,000%. Yeah. And then to be the one out there on the fringe, and that I went through a process where I had so much like character defamation. Is that what do you call it? Defamation of character?
Oh yeah. Because
slander. Yeah. Like people not being able to perceive me as I truly am, because I did like completely just walk away. At that time I was like, none of this is real. This is all insanity. And I've got to find my way back to truth, whatever that is for me. And that made me look really crazy to a lot of people, because I gave up everything. I gave up everything, and I
how brave.
Lived a whole different lifestyle than I ever had. And it was the most sacred thing that I could have ever done for myself. And now I've been on the edge of like, okay, we went there, and then I had to go to the place where I'm like, well, this is all insane. For real. We don't like, and then to have to bring myself back to like, okay, well, how can I hold the full spectrum here? Because this is the reality that I live in as well. And yet I don't live in this reality at all most of the time. So it's a very interesting.
I just got to thinking about it. I was like, I really don't think it's just people here. I think it's just humans.
Yeah. And I see that we're shifting. Like there is you can see that there is an evolution happening in that way right now.
Or sometimes it's evolution, and then sometimes it's doubling down.
Oh, yeah.
On the other side.
Yeah, I like that. Doubling
it's like
down.
Some people are doubling down on their dimension, and instead of moving forward and shifting.
Totally. Yeah. And that's, to me, it's like good. That's okay. 'Cause it takes, how do I say this? It's like, it's okay that you're not for everyone, because then it takes all the excess away out of the way. Like there's so much that I don't deal with in my world, because I'm like, oh, I just don't even, like, I don't even resonate in that way at all. And it's interesting too sometimes, because sometimes I'll see something and I'm like, oh, that still happens? Like, whoa.
Or I don't know. Same, I was just having a conversation with my husband about this last night, that I encountered a situation where I was like, I received some information that people are still acting in a way that I didn't know. That we were still doing this in a world like this, in this economy.
I know exactly what you're speaking to.
And maybe like a spiritual economy is what I mean. But that's like my filler of like, I can't believe this in this economy.
It is very interesting to just be a witness and to recognize that we are living in a multitude of dimensions in my world. Like I work a lot in that quantum awareness of just like the multitude of all of it.
My friend Kenzie's going to love you.
Well, I already love Kenzie.
My friend Kenzie, she and we always talk about how like we're jumping through portals.
Totally.
And so all the time. And so like the other day she texted me and she was like, is our friend stock named Peaches or sprinkles. And I was like, it's peaches. And she's like, I'm in a different dimension.
And when you start seeing that, like literally that we really are dimension hopping all the time. And it's a trip. And I've just had to be like, I've had to let go of so much of the mind, of course, because it can't keep up with it. But I know it in a deeper way, like in a GNOW way, like a knowing. I'm like, oh, I just totally flipped a timeline. Like I'm in a totally different timeline now than what I was yesterday or earlier today or a minute ago.
My husband conveniently uses that as a way to be like, oh, we're in a different dimension. You didn't tell me to do that. And I was like, you didn't tell me this event was coming up that we had to go to. We're in a different dimension. I'm like, no, sir. Yeah, that's not how that works.
Yeah. Yeah. But I am fascinated. I'm fascinated by so many things. I'm just fascinated, honestly, all the time by how we even manage this whole thing with all the different, it blows me away. But it really is interesting to think, that we only like register like 10% or something. So they say, I don't know who they are, but like that we only really are registering that little bit. And so it does give a lot of space for grace in the way of like, well, I know I had the conversation, but you may not have even been present for the conversation I had with you. Yeah. And I remember my one of my partners that we had this happen one time and we were very good, like communicating and thinking we're on the same page. And then something was said and it clued me in and I was like, wait a minute. What do you think we're talking about? And she was like, no. And I was like, whoa, no. Like we had been for weeks living in these like alternate universes thinking we were on the same page. And it was a trip. It was like, whoa.
It's like every show from the early 2000s.
Yes. It was one of the most like, okay, no, this is really real that we do totally just live completely different lives. And we all assume that we're living the same ones. Yeah. And we're not.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's great to know there's other people that see that too.
Yes, I see.
Yes, thank you.
I see. Said the time hopper, I guess.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. Anyway, well,
we did a thing.
Is there anything that you want to talk about that you didn't get to talk about?
No, this was great.
Yeah,
it was a good first getting my feet wet.
Get your toe wet. Yeah,
I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Welcome. It's not as scary.
It is.
I will peer pressure anyone, and I will full send make you record an episode with me.
I love that though, because that's what I think anybody. It's like being. Sometimes we just need a hand to reach out to us and be like, "Come here, let me show you. It's not as scary as it seems." And even if it is scary to you, like there's people there, and that's one of the things that I have said to my business partner recently is. Coming to meet you, coming to this, to the
library,
not the library, the podcast festival thing. And doing that, I was like, the thing I feel like that has been missing is community for me around it. And that was something that I was so grateful for. Is everybody there was just like everybody's so kind, and that's how I am as a person. So it was like it felt really good to know that there is a community here of support, and so that if there are things that I get, discombobulated about, that there's people there that I can, and that's a big step for me because I've always been the one to have to be I've been the do it all myselfer and carrying it all. And so I'm like, I ain't doing that no more. I will tell you, menopause has done a whole number on me. And I'm like, nope. I don't have to, I'm not doing it by myself. I just don't have to. Yeah. Unless I want to.
Nope. And podcasters are cool. And there's no gatekeeping. We all are just, not all, I shouldn't say all, but, most are very kind and excited to find another person that's interested in the weird thing that we do.
Yeah, I love that. And I love to, I often tend to be like, I want to talk and I want to say, and so to have other people that have that same energy as well and that also can listen, I think it's such a beautiful thing because it requires both.
Yeah, absolutely.
It requires the listening and the being able to speak. And so I appreciate that in every container that has that capacity because not all of them do.
Podcasts are cool.
Yes. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Do you want people to find you?
Oh, do I want people to find
If you
me?
don't,
No.
you can suggest something that you do want people to find.
No, people can find me. They can find me at Mystic Divine Love on Instagram would be my social. I'm not really, I'm there. I'm actually in my stories. If you want to find me, you'll find me in my stories. It's really
And messaging.
Yeah,
That's
and
how we got connected.
DMing, and yeah, that's where you'll find me there most of the time. And then, I think I'll leave it there. I think there for now is where they can find me, and then they can see all the other things that I dip my
There
toes
you are.
in.
There you are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll post this as a bonus episode. You're welcome. Okay. Love you. Bye.
Bye-bye.